In our next session for FTD, we will take a look at remote access, SSL TLS, VPN configuration. I'm going to quickly discuss the configuration steps, and we will take a look at that implementation scenario, but unfortunately, because of the limitations of our rack setup, which is certain licenses, we will not be able to test this configuration. But I am still going to get you through the wizard. I'm still going to show you the steps that you will have to take to get this work. So if you have access to the equipment with the right licensing, you will be able to test that type of config. Okay, in most cases, you will want to start with certificate configuration, and you can do this from the device's certificates or from the object's PKI cert enrollment. This is going to be important because a certificate is going to be used to authenticate your server, which is going to be the FTD, to the clients. And this certificate must be then installed on the FTD. And even as we will see, we will be able to build the enrollment object during the wizard configuration. You will still have to install this object. You will still have to go to one of these two tabs and kind of like activate it. Okay, the next step is going to be to select an AnyConnect image. This is going to be generally needed, assuming that your clients don't have AnyConnect installed. So you can do this via the AnyConnect file, VPN object, or you can do this via the wizard. Next, we will have to select authentication server for our users. So I am, of course, assuming that we will be using AAA to authenticate connecting clients. If this is going to be AD or LDAP, you will have to add a realm. If this is going to be a radius server, you will have to define it over the objects or via the wizard. Note that for a radius, it is going to be pretty useful to check some of the attributes, because FTD is going to be actually sending two types of attributes during authentication and authorization, which is something that we can then use to build our policy rules on our radius server, such as ICE, to easily distinguish between VPN authentications from other type of connections. Just to show you this in the documentation, we will go down to a VPN section and take a look at remote access. It's going to be over here. And down the bottom, there's going to be a section for radius. Scroll down to the bottom over here. Assignment policy. Now, somewhere here it is going to mention the attributes. So actually, it's not on the bottom. I just have to find it manually. It's going to be this section, radius server attributes for FTD. And take a look at this first table. It says attributes sent from FTD to radius server. And these two, 146 and 150, which is connection profile name or tunnel group name and client type respectively, these two are sent during authentication and authorization. So you can use these two to match your VPN authentications, one of these two, maybe just the tunnel group or ideally the client type. We've got number 2 for SSL and 6 for IPv2, and then possibly a tunnel group to provide even more granular authentication rules or just authorization rules. A session type is used during accounting, so it's less useful. Now, on the radius server itself, you will have to make sure that under network devices, you've got an entry for your FTD and not FMC. We take a look at our topology. This device is going to be configured to terminate those remote access connections that will be originated from PC1. So what I have to add on my radius server is going to be, of course, the VPN gateway because this device is gonna act as a radius client during authentication. So your eyes must know how to get to FTD, and in our case, it would be actually this interface what we would use to get to ICE. So I would have to add 172.16.7.10. Now we will get back to routing setup in just a moment. Okay, now maybe let's also take a look at that in the authorization policy. Again, I won't be able to test it, and I'm gonna open one more for dictionaries, policy elements dictionaries, because as you build a role, you will have to find the right attribute. I'm gonna call it VPN. This is authorization. So first thing I would actually check if those attributes are in the radius dictionary, and they should be. We take a look at the system dictionaries, and it must be radius section, and it's not going to be IETF. This is Cisco custom attributes, and it's going to be, I would aim at this one, Cisco VPN 3000. I would be looking for those over here, and I want to find the client type. Let's take a look at it. We should expect to see the attribute number 150, and it's over here. So that would be an attribute you would use in the authorization role. It also shows us the values, possible values for this attribute, like for IPsec VPN. So this is going to be IPv2. We're looking for value 6, and this should match what they tell us here, and it does. Versus number 2 is for SSL/TLS. So in the policy, I would just go to the new condition, to the advanced option. I would choose the radius. Or no, Cisco VPN 3000. Actually, in the policy, you can reach it here. So I would choose this option. I would then look for client type. Let's just check the attribute. This is going to be 150, so I'm going to choose this option. And I would then choose the type of connection that I want to match during authentication. So I can build separate role for SSL authentication versus, let's say, IPv2, using these two. You can, of course, use one role for both. Just duplicate, use the OR logic, and select the other option. So I would do something like this to have a separate role for VPN user authentication. So in this case, actually, it's going to be for authorization. But you could also use those attributes in the authentication policy, like maybe you want to use a separate database, separate settings for the process. Okay, what else do we have to think about as we deploy that type of a VPN on FTD? We would have to build a policy, which is something that is going to be configured for the wizard. That's the only option as how you can do this on the FMC. We would then want to add an AnyConnect profile, and this is something that you have to do using a standalone profile editor. You can find one on the PC. Just go to All Programs, Cisco, AnyConnect profile editor, and it's going to be the VPN profile editor, this one. I have it open, and what I would be looking here are actually two portions of the profile you want to pay attention to. The preferences part 1 is where you want to select the supported IP protocol, like IPv4 versus IP version 6, maybe both. You can also change some of those options as whether the users will be able to control them or not. If you are connecting to the client using RDP, you want to use this option, allow remote users. And then pretty much the remaining part of the profile is going to be the server list. So you just add an entry for your gateway, you put an IP address, and you select the protocol you want to use for the session, IPsec or SSL. Okay, but this was just to show you how to deal with this profile editor for VPNs. Now, in terms of optional configuration, you may want to modify access control policy. So same as with site-to-site VPNs, by default, the sysopt connection permit VPN command is off. But this is something that you will be able to tune, in this case, I believe via FMC, the wizard itself. If not, you will have to do this via FlexConfig. This is so we can allow the remote access traffic, the client traffic from the tunnel to go via the FTD without having to modify the ACP. So modification of the ACP is optional. You will have to add a role in the ACP if you don't use the permit VPN option, which is basically a bypass for VPN traffic. Okay, now the exemption if you are using network address translation for the VPN traffic, for the traffic that is affected, that is going to the tunnel as it returns. Split tunneling, this is going to be very useful for testing environments. Then in terms of other options, you will probably want to build a pool either on a DHCP server or on the FTD itself. And this is assuming that you want to use the full client version of the connection. So we will have to assign an IP address to the connecting client. And we can also do this via the wizard. And then the connection profile settings. So this is talking about the ASA's tunnel group. Well, here there is actually an important change from the ASA's behavior, and that's pretty much the only one. The group policy attributes are not inherited from the default group policy. So like you build your custom group policy, if there are going to be certain attributes that you don't set, they won't be inherited from the default group. The default group is only going to be used if no custom group policy was configured. One additional note on the routing is set up for a VPN authentication. So this is all about this communication between our gateway and the radius server. This is something that can be provided through the management or regular data interfaces. And the management routes, the management routing table routes are preferred over the regular routing table used, populated with the data interfaces, used by the data interfaces. So this means that if you, let's say your radius server is reachable via the management interface, but not the data port, you will have to add the appropriate route to the management table. Now, if the opposite is true, you will want to make sure that you don't have a matching route for the radius server in the management routing table, because it would take precedence over the regular routing table prefix. Okay, so stuff like this, you can always look it up in the documentation to get some details. What we will do now is that we will move on to a short demonstration. So PC1 is supposed to be acting as our client for this communication, and FTD1 is going to act as our gateway. Again, I won't be able to test this configuration because of the licensing and also certain other things related to our rack setup. Well, we're going to start this configuration with the wizard. So I'm going to ignore other ICE server settings again because we will not be testing it, but we will focus on the FMC portion. So devices, remote access, this is how you enable the wizard. We will add a new VPN. I'm gonna call it PC1 VPN. Okay, I'm gonna choose both protocols for the connection, and we will Select FTD, then click Next. Connection profile name, I can leave it like that. If this is supposed to be for a certain group of users, like sales, like maybe another department, or maybe you are using some sort of a different nomenclature for VPNs, you would probably want to put a meaningful name over here. Authentication method, it's going to be AAA. We will select authentication server. This is something that you can add from here, like AD LDAP or Radius. Just give it a name, put an IP address, click a plus sign over here, put the key, put IP address, and you're done. I already have one defined, so I'm going to choose it. This is supposed to be my eyes. It's just to show you all steps in the wizard. Okay, for authentication, the other option would be to use certificates and username password on the clients, but you will just go for AAA. IP address pool, you can add it over here. I have one defined. And then the group policy, we will say we want to add a new one. New policy, new G policy. So we will choose these two protocols. We will allow for SSL and IPv2 connections. Okay, banner, DNS, split tunneling. Well, split tunneling, I could say that I want to tunnel traffic specified in my access list. Like if the goal was to only allow people to connect to the inside 10, 11, 11, 0/24, I would build an object over here. I'm gonna call it in VPN. Let's say add, and I would choose the inside network. That's 11, 10, 11, 11, 0/24. So with this configuration, we will only tunnel, we will only send packets destined to this prefix via the VPN tunnel. Everything else is going to be sending clear on the client side. Okay, any connect profile. Again, this is something you can do using the standalone profile editor, which is available on the PC, on the test PC. I already have one. I'm going to choose profile from the list. SSL settings, connection settings, like timeouts, like keep alives, and also session settings, idle timeout, connection time, filtering within the tunnel. This is optional. Now, did I select the policy? No, you also have to select this policy. Now, if you make a mistake here, you will still be able to correct this configuration once the wizard finishes its job, because there is going to be a corresponding VPN instance that you will be able to add it. Okay, you can choose the AnyConnect package if you want to push it to the connecting clients. Of course, in the first place, you would have to upload it from here. Let's choose this one. Okay, what interface you want to terminate the tunnel on? I'm going to say on the outside, we will disable the TLS. And for certificate, as I said in the beginning of this session, you could potentially add a certificate from here. Like choose self-signed, for instance. Give it a name. I'm going to call this certificate enrollment object my VPN C1. And we will say that this is supposed to be a self-signed certificate, so you need to populate the common name. Okay, I'm gonna say that the common name is FTD1 VPN. This is security, INE. We will choose the default RSA key and not use replication. So I can save this, I can choose this option from this list, because I want to make sure that this instance is selected here for certificate enrollment. And notice this information. You say certificate enrollment must be completed before deploying this VPN config. So you'll have to fix this at the end. Now we move on. This is the summary of the configuration. And they also tell us about some additional configuration requirements, potential ones. like access control policy update, net exemption, DNS config, and network interface configuration. So this stuff we already have. We'll just have to play a little bit with the access control policy related settings, and then the certificate enrollment. I'm gonna finish, and we will now take a look at the instance. So we have 3 tabs for this particular instance. This is the custom group policy. We can edit, excuse me, this is the custom connection profile. I can edit it here. It calls out a pool. This is for authentication. Aliases, this is so people can select the right name as they connect on any connect. And we can also change the group policy, edit the settings. I'm gonna go to advanced. There is an option where you can, right, that's the option I was looking for, enable client bypass protocol. I believe that this is gonna correspond to sysop connection permit VPN. Maybe I'm gonna save, and let's look for this client. They say if you selected bypass access control policy for the encrypted traffic on the access interface tab, let's go back to the FMC. So it's not gonna be this option. Go back to the policy. Any connection settings. Okay, let's save this. Yeah, let's take a look at access interfaces. It's not here. It might be let's go back. Bypass access control policy for the encrypted traffic on the access interface tab. Take a look at this section. Devices, VPN, remote access, added access interfaces. Select the following under access settings. Okay, where is this option? I don't see the bypass option over here. Okay, so I would actually go back. I'm gonna say we will take a look at this in just a moment on the CLI. Okay, the other thing you can do over here, so this is where you modify the connection profile, the interface, tunnel terminating interface settings, and also the image, the address assignment policy, group policy, and IKv2 settings, crypto map, which is IPsec proposals, IKv2 policy, and other optional IKv2 parameters. So this is all you can do over here. But there's going to be just one more thing you have to think about as you deploy the VPN for the first time, which is the certificate. So we will go to devices, certificates, and I will want to click add, select the FTD, and then choose the one we have created in the wizard. So it says it is installing, but in reality we will have to deploy this. And go back, let's go to objects, object management. And let's take a look at the PKI cert enrollment option. Okay, so it's over here, it's showing up, which is good. We will now try to deploy this policy. Unfortunately, no, I won't be able to. Well, we might try to make some sort of a workaround. I'm gonna disable SSL in this configuration. So we will have to do this over here. Yeah, let's try to do it now. Let's try to deploy. Again, it's still not gonna work in our case because of certain limitations of those racks. The licensing here is just the trial version. But now at least I will be able to show you some of those configuration commands on the FTD itself. Okay, so the policy is here. The policy got to the FTD. We will quickly take a look at the CA config and also the sysopt command. Let's say show run crypto CA. So we see that this configuration, the VPN C1 is now in place. And for the sysopt command, it says that this option is actually disabled. Probably the easiest way to fix it would be just to go ahead and apply it via the flex config syntax.